credit for.
Absolutely, especially when we factor in that a lot of the Rush Warriors this week are running Cult Neophyte and Ogremancer. And in Alutemu's case, he's not running the Ogremancers. He's got the double Neophytes and the Trend Trasher still in there. So perhaps he has hit the best of both worlds in being able to still mess with Token Druid and have the Trend Trashers in there for a bit more proactive development and synergy, because he is still running double Crab Rider and of course Imprisoned Gnarg.
My greetings.
Okay, a respectable starting hand for Lamby with double Fungal Fortunes. Bloom picked up as well for a bit of flexibility in his play.
I was oohing at Alutemu's hand though, because not only is it just Neophyte, it's Samuro this early. And the funny thing about drawing Samuro early is that you don't actually get to buff it off stage dive, and Samuro vanilla is not enough to deal with Glowflies. It can deal with Gibberlings, but hardly ever do Gibberlings stay as 1/1s when they come down onto the board the same turn. It does mean that Alutemu can buff with a potential conditioning or this run tack that he's just drawn to get the Samuro to a relevant attack range. But for now, the real story is Neophyte is going to shut down Fungal Fortunes on curve. Or not.
Yeah, I mean, it could. I guess Alutemu going with the develop first and then faff about with denying their turns later on. Because again, I mean, this is a pretty important point that we come across a lot with Neophyte versus Druid. Is it better to deny the Fungal Fortunes, or is it better to deny what comes after that? Is a pretty complicated point.
But it seems that after turn 3, it's kind of hard to say exactly when the thing that comes after comes down, right? Is it going to be turn 4? Do they innervate Glowfly? Are you trying to deny buff specifically?
Yeah.
And I honestly thought the development of Barprakar was so Alutemu could get down the Trend Trasher pretty early and try and push more damage. But he's going for Neophyte this turn to shut down some mana cheat into the Glowfly Swarm. And while it's pretty powerful, it means that Lamby can Glowfly the next turn. And I'm starting to see Alutemu's plan come together, actually, because then he can go for Run Thack pre-developed and then immediately play Samuro, right?
I think that's the plan. The coin run thack. I mean, I would imagine that's what he's setting up for. Assuming, like, if lambyseries doesn't play anything, then run thack can still go face, and you just keep juicing up the Samuro turn after turn, and things will get worse and worse. And obviously, this Tent Trasher is, if anything, only going to get cheaper as the Crab Rider can come down for yet more development later on as well. But the coin run thack, I absolutely agree with you, is what I want to see on this turn.
Smart, even though he doesn't get the rush value on it, it can go face or into a Glowfly, but if you're planning on Samuro next turn, then it's not going to go into a Glowfly. It also still gives him some flexibility, because if it's, say, just Glowflies with no buffs on them, maybe Alutemu doesn't want to Samuro into that. Although with this pickup of Parade Leader, he could also set up for that into Samuro, right, next turn.
Wow. Okay, he's holding back yet another turn. Of course means that the Samuro is not buffed for another turn, so he's going to have to get through this the old-fashioned way. You know, admittedly... oh, sorry.
No, he's got the Parade Leader and saved the coin, so...
Oh, right, apologies.
Samuro, yeah.
Okay. Well, that sounds even better then, because now you get a 5/5 in play this turn.
That draw changes a lot, but Lamby has the way to play around it. It is not just the naked Glowflies, which if you can avoid as Druid, you definitely want to, right? Because of that Samuro. So he's got the Soul of the Forest as some insurance, but it's still pretty powerful for Alutemu to clear most of these. He can go for actually clearing, I think, 3 of them with the second layer, or take the whole first layer with the Samuro and then trade down 2 with his remaining minions. That feels a bit scary though.
That's a good point. I hadn't considered like fully clearing some of them rather than getting through the whole first layer and leaving more of them up. It's kind of an interesting dynamic that you're striking there.
If you can take value trades, I think it's pretty tempting to go for like first layer, narrowing the board rather than taking down the entire first layer. But again, the scary thing for Lamby next turn, or at least from Alutemu's perspective, is Pride's Fury, because he's overloaded. And in that case, taking down the entire first layer seems better, because then if you take value trades and leave down narrower minions, then all those narrow minions can then value trade into your stuff.
Man, it's looking not as good for Alutemu as I was expecting, though. Can't even clear off another one here, so lambyseries very happily can slam down the Pride's Fury here, take a whole bunch of value trades, and just be looking pretty good overall.
It's 2 value trades and then 1 ugly trade into the 10th Thrasher, but then he's still very ahead on board, so I feel like it's worth... Oh, sorry, if that's Pride's Fury, but yeah, the Thorn Growth does just look better here, right? Because he still gets the BTs on the small minions, and then he doesn't trade like a 3-5 into a 5-3.
No, yeah, definitely better. I was just looking at the kind of clean, straight-up mana play of Pride's Fury, but I think this is a little bit better. Runthat can try and wrestle this one back, but honestly, he's just looking like he's under too much pressure here.
Pretty good. Only 3 minions left for Lamby, but he now has mana to go Solar, Pride's Fury, and Adorable Infestation. He probably just Gibberling at that point, right?
Yeah.
So powerful. And the best part for Lamby is he's seen the Samuro. That's like the end-all be-all of the matchup. There's still athletic studies that can potentially discover it, but then that one needs to be buffed as well. So just getting rid of the Runthack that could potentially buff a generated Samuro or some other bumper card type of madness, and everything else goes face. Really clean.
Very, very clean indeed. Very well played overall by Lamby. I think not being baited into what were the more kind of immediately apparent plays. Looking a little bit deeper to find the better plays overall. While, again, I was saying that I was critical of Alutemu's play of not going coin Runthack, when you thankfully explained it to me, I do think that his line kind of achieved the same rough thing. He just got down a 5-5 quicker than a 3-6, which, again, I don't think is going to make too much difference in the matchup. Overall, it was just the kind of hand that Warrior really struggles to deal with. 7 2-2s that death rattle into themselves afterwards. There's just nothing in the deck that can deal with that.
And Alutemu set up the very best he could against the average Druid draw, I would say, which is like turn 4's full board of Glowflies, right? If they hit the card draw into the Glowfly. Yeah. What you can't beat most of the time as Warrior is Glowfly into immediate Soul of the Forest. And to be fair, they need to have a very specific hand in order to be able to do that, like bank mana with Nature Studies, as Lamby did on the Cult Neophyte turn, to ensure that he was able to Bloom Innervate the Pride's Fury the same turn the Glowfly comes down. And when it's everything at once like that, Warrior just struggles to pick everything apart, and then the incremental damage piles up just a little bit too quickly, which is why I think Druid is favored in the matchup.
Indeed, and a big win for the Druid overall. Against Demon Hunter and Rogue, things could have got a little bit shakier for Lamby. Alutemu had a bit of a soft target on the token Druid at that point, so getting that out of the way, absolutely massive, and it means Lamby can move on to his Warrior, as Alutemu is going to be lining up his Warrior once again for a mirror. Taking a look at the lists overall, though, for our players, we saw Alutemu had that double Neophyte list. Lambyseries, though, has his signature N'Zoth Rush Warrior, which yesterday, it's got to be said, was looking premium.
Yeah, we got to see it take a very convincing win over Dawn's OTK Demon Hunter, which I think Moonfan is specifically able to solo that matchup in particular. Not that it's in the list just to be better against OTK Demon Hunter. It's because when you look at the base Rush Warrior, you're already running some Menagerie synergy with 10 Trasher, Crab Rider, Bumper Car, and Imprisoned Gunarg. And Lamby just thought, hey, what if I take out 2 cards for Beast and N'Zoth, and you have this deck, and those 2 cards he's removed are the Warmaul Challengers from the base list. And that's a card that I feel is not overly useful if you're not thinking that you're going to run into the likes of Aggro Paladin or Face Hunter. The Warmaul only really gets good if you hit Conditioning or Rakara to pair with it. So this list seems like it has more individual strong threats.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, and that's often very, very important in the Warrior matchup. It is back and forth, and you are often playing a bunch of small minions, but just first big thing online can spell trouble for your opponent if they don't have the specific tool to answer that threat. But for Lamby, right out the gate, Gunarg, obviously there's some anti-synergy with Sword Eater overwriting the weapon. Even then, I was kind of tempted at holding onto Sword Eater just because it's such a strong card.
It really is, but in this matchup, I feel that conditioning is so important to hit, because if your opponent can get down, say, early 10 Trasher or their first conditioning, a 2-5 plus weapon is doing very little to actually race them in that regard. So Lamby did hit the double conditionings. All he's lacking now is a little bit of card draw.
lambyseries Alutemu having no qualms whatsoever about just throwing out the parade leader. Yes, it's going to die in a couple of turns, but I think as we've seen time and again, when your opponent has the Gnarg on one, your early boards are just going to die. So you may as well throw it out and try and get some kind of value out of the buff with Crab Rider next turn.
Yeah, it's got this cool interplay, right? Because if your opponent goes for that turn 1 Gnarg, you can actually almost nearly guarantee that your Parade Leader is going to stick. So you can cash out with the Crab Rider or a potential bumper car and make it such that there's 2 minions that you want to swing into the next turn. The Parade Leader does get a little utility later on with things like Playmaker and bumper car for clearing, but if you have to do that, it often feels like you're behind. So I really like proactive Parade Leader in the matchup.
Yep, 2 mana 3/4, historically pretty good in Hearthstone when you're allowed to play it.
But lambyseries having hit the 10 Trasher off of the stage dive is extremely powerful.
Yeah, it is powerful for sure, but I think Alutemu is coming out of this arguably the winner. Like, Lamby has of course gone for 1 conditioning, which will bump up his Parade Leader, his Gnarg when that comes down, but you know, Gnarg is not a priority minion to hit with conditioning. He doesn't have any card draw to go alongside it. He's kind of running out of value in the mid game.
True. I think, sorry, the 10 Trasher was buffed by rank 1 conditioning, not stage dive, my mistake. And because Lamby's hand is of this shape where there's nothing to do really until Troublemaker, I think he's just meant to greed on the Samuro. That's the trump card, right? If you get enough buffs on that, it can deal with pretty much any board. So he's just hoping to not take too much damage. If he can help it, I think he would like to send the Samuro clear going into turn 7 so he can immediately follow up with Troublemaker.
Okay, going with the Claw Machine here. I wasn't entirely sure whether he'd be going for Rakara or Parade Leader here. Obviously, Rakara is more important to protect so that it can get more value, but it's also a 6/6 here. It's very, very tough to kill this on curve, especially after you've just seen 1 10 Trasher already.
Gonna buff herself to 7/7 as well, and Lamby is on a clock. We can see he has the 3 attack Samuro that can go to 5 with the Parade Leader, but that still has to bump into Rakara to clear, and that's really expensive. And Alutemu has just set up this board of individual tall minions, which you don't really want to send Samuro into, but he's not got a choice.
Yeah, Parade Leader Samuro is literally the only play that you're allowed to make on this turn. Everything else is pretty much just game losing. As it does allow you to clear the board, get quite far in the lead. One of the best plays that you could hit, and it does maybe bridge him that gap up to Troublemaker, up to N'Zoth, because if Lamby can survive, he is well back in the driving seat once those late game turns hit.
But it's this 1 turn, right? It happened turn 6. He has no play for next turn, and he's under quite a bit of pressure from the early turns from Alutemu. And so we could see the Samuro in response here. And if Alutemu really wants, he can even cash in the ETC, Parade Leader, just go full pressure in this turn before Troublemaker.
Yeah, ETC I'm liking the look of. I think it's just a 3 attack Samuro, so well, you don't have to, of course, play Parade Leader or Playmaker to help get the clear. It's all just there already. And this, I think, is great realization from Alutemu that things are slowing down for lambyseries, but they're going to ramp up again quickly. So let's apply max pressure and try and close out the game right now.
And he's able to go Playmaker 10 Trasher next turn, which is just far too much pressure for even Troublemaker on curve that's buffed to deal with.
Yeah, I like the preemptive
turn 7
bump.
is really the end-all be-all.
Yeah, it is brutal. I think he makes the best of a bad situation by bumping preemptively. Maybe Troublemaker can clear it off then, if it's a completely dead turn from Alutemu. But that is the opposite of a dead turn. My goodness, this is just looking over for Lamby. His N'Zoth warrior, simply too slow. Too many, I mean, you know, he drew double Troublemaker. The N'Zoth isn't really the culprit here, but his curve just not shaping out at all.
I mean, this N'Zoth could have been normal challenger, and that still would not have won this game, so I'm not going to fault the deck building too much. Gave it the best shot he could, using 1 conditioning early to not fall behind, because he recognized that his hand was late game oriented, but second Samuro gets the last laugh, and Alutemu here ties up the series, his own Rush Warrior out of the way now.
Yeah, Druid down, Rush Warrior down on either side. Taking a look at the decks that are left over that might be a little bit difficult to get a win with. The OTK Demon Hunter is, of course, the standout for Alutemu. And with lambyseries having the Warrior and the Rogue left over, I think the Demon Hunter still in a perfectly decent spot. We saw the power of Moonfang against OTK Demon Hunter yesterday, of course, when Lamby went up against Dawn. But I would say that was a little bit of an outlier. Dawn hit very, very little in terms of removal, very little in terms of card draw. His hand was really not helping him at any points along the way. Whereas Alutemu, with a slightly more average or even good draw on the OTK Demon Hunter, I think the Moonfang should be eminently deal withable.
Indeed. I do think Lamby will end up queuing the Rush Warrior again, though, because it's still got a decent matchup against OTK Demon Hunter, if not favored with this build. I still haven't really tested the lack of Warmaul challengers yet, but I'd have to imagine Warmauls are very bad against Demon Hunter because they're so low pressure, and you have tons of ways to clear up their other minions. So I do like this version, and the Rush Warrior has traditionally had a better matchup versus Rogue, although having said that, I don't know if the N'Zoth is maybe too slow, because it feels like in the games where Rogue is able to take the win against Rush Warrior, it often happens before N'Zoth ever comes into the equation.
Well, here it is once again. lambyseries fighting for heal life here in Grandmasters. One game apiece, and now this N'Zoth Warrior that he's put a lot of stock in as being the premier deck, the premier version of Warrior. We'll see if it can get the job done again against the OTK Demon Hunter. Moonfang already in hand, which is interesting, of course. But as we've talked about a few times, 3 instances of damage that you have to deal to Moonfang is not especially difficult for OTK Demon Hunter. It's just Immolation Aura plus Hero Power, whatever. But, you know, once you start buffing it up, 4 or 5 does start to become a little tricky.
Right. And honestly, if it does take a whole Immolation Aura and they tank 6 to deal with the Moonfang, I think it's done its job. The real trump card for the OTK Demon Hunter to deal with Moonfang is the fact that play order matters with Moonfang into Moarg, and the Moonfang will almost always come onto the board before you play a Moarg, which means the Moarg card text will double the 1 damage that Moonfang takes. And so Moarg plus Immolation Aura does kill an unbuffed Moonfang.
Okay, well, we got ourselves a decent hand here for Lamby. A little slow, but technically a 3-4-5 curve if the mech sticks around.
Yeah. And Alutemu going for a very cool play here because you can tempo out Moargs against Rush Warrior. They don't run any damage spells, and so they're unable to abuse the card text on Moarg. Lamby losing on board. Climactic dead to Moarg, but he is going to play it out anyway because the Rakara is also dead to Moarg and leaves even less attack in play.
Yeah, it's just such a sick play overall. I love the way that Alutemu is approaching this again, knowing the exact weakness of every deck he goes up against. It's just impressive how he can always find that one perfect weak point in the armor, whatever his opponent may bring. A couple of different options there on that turn, of course. It could even have been second Moarg plus Fell Scream, just to obliterate the board and pull even further ahead in the lead. But just going for a little bit of card draw and not over-committing with the Moargs is something I can understand as well.
And he crucially has killed off the mech, so the Tent Trasher is not available this turn for Lamby, and he has yet another super slow turn. Oh, he's killing it with 3 cards. That feels terrible. That's such a huge win for Alutemu.
It really is. He's put himself in such a good position. He has all the time in the world to start looking towards his own card draw. I believe that was a skull off the top, which is the one turn that Alutemu did not want to find it. He needed 1 extra turn, obviously with the coin still intact, to get it down. So this game becomes a little bit more tricky now as to how you sequence it.
Yeah, he bought himself the most time he possibly could in the early game, but now it gets so weird to get the skull to the left because you do want to hold on to Immolation Moarg for potential Moonfang or just any other of the regular boards from Warrior. He could tempo out this Moarg again, but this is going into not just Moonfang, which would make the Moonfang text overwrite the Moargs, but also Tent Trasher, right? It's just dead on board to that. So Alutemu going double Spectral Sight for 1 draw, and then the skull again.
No!
Too awkward.
Yikes. Obviously not still impossible for Alutemu to outcast this skull. More likely from the left, I would argue, at this point than from the right. But with a couple of good draws, it's still possible from the right-hand side.
And Lamby taking this dead turn from Alutemu to develop the Moonfang. Again, Alutemu can clear it without taking damage, but the Moarg Immolation or a combo is so expensive, right? That's his best board clear against every other threat in Lamby's deck. There's been no Troublemakers yet, and this is really looking like a hand that takes a long time for Alutemu to hit the combo. So we're in the territory where Troublemaker and N'Zoth could be very relevant.
I mean, the play I'm looking at is just Immolation or I-Beam and then Moarg afterwards, because then you keep the Moarg in play, you set up next turn for Coin, Fellscream Blast, Skull to outcast it. I appreciate that's then, you know, 2 of your Moargs gone, but you still have 1 left in the deck plus a Philosophy, so the combo is still very much achievable.
Yeah, definitely true. I am liking the sound of that. It does mean that he is looking at potentially a very hard time clearing the next board from lambyseries if he plays the Moarg and it gets rushed into though. So you could see this play and then not Moarg at the end. Oh, Fellscream.
Okay. Sure, I mean this...
the I-Beam.
Yeah, achieves a similar thing, right? It's just saying that a 1-mana I-Beam is better than a 1-mana Fellscream Blast, which I think, yeah, I probably agree with that.
If he is going to use the Moarg here, he expects it to get rushed down, right? And then if it's 10 Trasher, which it very likely will be, then the I-Beam actually deals with the 10 Trasher without having to use the hero power, which the Fellscream would not have done.
Yeah, just super smart optimization from Alutemu. And either way, the core of the turn is still intact. You go Coin, 1-mana spell, Skull of Gul'dan. If he can get himself Il'gynoth here, second Moarg down to 0, he is looking in a premium spot.
A 1 combo piece discounted, Moarg discounted, so Philosophy is extremely strong. Lamby has another turn of development, gonna go digging with the studies after Rokara to bank mana just in case. And Trasher playable, right? Because there's a Crab Rider stuck on board.
Yeah, the one thing you don't want to pick is Emerald Sky Talon because you really, really want that Moonfang back, not the 2-1 off of N'Zoth.
Not gonna overload onto the board, instead taking the Claw Machine to give him a turn 8 that draws him more cards once it dies. It's a bit less immediate pressure, but he kind of recoups that damage by playing the ETC this early on.
Yeah, and he also potentially gives himself a better mech off of N'Zoth as well instead of the bumper car, which is, you know, potentially kind of relevant as well to bump up the amount of attack when that does come down on turn 9 as well. Alutemu, though, obviously has to be considering just going for the Throwglaive plus second Skull. Could be achieved through Throwglaive on the Rokara, deliberately not getting the Throwglaive back, then go Ethereal Orc Merchant, then Skull? Or Hero Power instead. Oh no, yeah, you have to do this.
You can evaluate later if he's going to ping off the Rokara. It's not even necessary in every single case because that is a pretty valuable combo piece. And now he's hit Eldrazi Warblade, so I think that's a much better card to use than Ethereal Orc Merchant to kill off the one big threat on lambyseries side of the board. The ETC can push damage, but really no more than what's on the board because Alutemu doesn't have minions to rush into.
Yeah, I'm not seeing much else other than just playing out at least the Claw Machine on this turn. I guess there's arguments as to whether you go for the Parade Leader, as you are fairly likely to draw some extra rush minions. You could buff their attack up later on, but still a super close game here. Lambyseries, will the N'Zoth be enough next turn? Again, Alutemu low on card draw. He's played both Spectral Sights, both Skulls of Gul'dan, still hasn't found Il'gynoth, hasn't reduced Il'gynoth. It's a close one.
It definitely is. And more importantly, we're looking at him needing to draw the other Immolation Aura, right? To deal with the N'Zoth board. What's going to be in it even? Moonfang, Crab Rider, Claw Machine, or Bumper Car?
Tent Trasher.
Tent Trasher. No Pirate, no Demon. There's like more than 5 minion types. This is not Battlegrounds.
Yeah, no Quillboars either, thankfully. But overall, just a very, very scary board that is going to be coming down for Lambyseries. Not going to be enough to kill Alutemu quite yet, of course, especially as it looks like possibly the the claw machine will just straight up not die, so it can't be resurrected.
But, okay, yeah.
Fair.
I mean, it's effectively the same thing, but pushing more damage this turn. The difference is that if Alutemu kills it this turn, Lamby gets one more draw.
Yeah.
Then he gets to save the 6 health, right?
Gnarg is pretty much...
Ring, it's not there because he doesn't have the greatest clear for all these minions.
Yeah. That's the scary play. Honestly, I think at this point, he's looking more at killing his opponent than he is of getting the clear on this board ever, as especially with the claw machine as well. There's straight up just lethal represented here.
The Immolation Aura is found though, and to be fair, Alutemu had very good odds of finding either that or Il'gynoth, and I think Il'gynoth is just super lethal here, so could still be Il'gynoth off of the Chaos Strike for the immediate lethal. We're looking at double talented Arcanist, Moarg, and the Ethereal Aug Merchant all still playable.
That philosophy alone, though, is a very big deal because this is his last Moarg. Now he can go for philosophy plus Moarg. Although with that draw, does he just guarantee himself lethal?
He can start with it, and if it's Il'gynoth off the top, I do think he gets lethal.
He guarantees himself lethal for next turn at least. Okay.
Right, yeah. Yeah, this is just smart from Alutemu, right? He knows he's never dead to this amount of damage left from Lamby, even if there's Alex Straza off the top. So Alutemu is just making sure he gets the guaranteed lethal next turn. No overdraw, no fatigue to worry about. Il'gynoth, the very last card in the deck.
Yeah, it's always funny when you see it, but Alutemu has made the very best of a rough situation. I think the real genius this game was, of course, the tempo 3-5 Moarg that just bought him all the time in the world. Like, there was no threat of losing early board control at that point. And then by knowing exactly which cards he could dump to free up the skulls, I think it was that perfect balance that we look for as an OTK Demon Hunter player between saving removal pieces for when it's necessary versus needing to free up those skulls of Gul'dan so that you can outcast them and reduce the key combo pieces in your deck. And quite clearly now, he's going to have 1 billion damage next turn, and there is nothing that Lamby can do.
Billion is roughly 48, I think, not even including the weapon. And even if Lamby could somehow get this Kargath to turn into a prime immediately, he would not get out of range of all of that. So that is going to be game 3 to Alutemu. Very impressive stuff, even against a relatively early Moonfang. It just goes to show the difference when you have the ability to outcast Skull. It's so stark, the contrast between this game and what Dawn had in his opening hand yesterday.
Yeah, you know, Dawn did not have the best of hands, make no mistake, but, I mean, just Alutemu works some magic. Every time you see him play Hearthstone, he brings something cool to the table, and it's always a delight to watch as he clearly just knows this matchup absolutely inside and out. The Warrior going to be going down 0-2 for lambyseries here. He needs to get 2 wins in a row against the Miracle Rogue as the one remaining deck for Alutemu in order to stay in Grandmasters.
Sounds like a tough proposition. Again, I'm not necessarily sure if the build of Warrior is better or worse against Miracle Rogue. My inclination is to say worse because N'Zoth takes a very long time to come down. Moonfang can be strong, but it's very manageable for Rogue if it's not buffed by the likes of conditioning. But on the flip side, if you get to be ahead by the time Moonfang comes down and the Rogue is forced to face tank 6 to deal with it, then that can feel absolutely game-winning. And that's not even counting lambyseries' own Rogue, right?
Yeah, exactly. Of course, he needs to get the win against the Rogue with both his Warrior and his Rogue. So he's looking at a good matchup, I would argue, again, finally with the Warrior. Like you said, it's not as good as the standard builds, would be my guess. Or would be your guess that I'm stealing. But it's still a good matchup overall. The 10 trashes, I think, are just so crucial in this matchup now. Even if they don't actually kill the Octobots, just putting the fear of the 10 trashes in your opponent's mind. The fact that they can't just tempo out these Octobots because you have so many ways to kill them off shortly afterwards, I think is very, very important in the matchup. And in addition to that, just the standard big minions, the conditioning being so backbreaking against Rogue. And therefore, good matchup, but then just a straight-up mirror to round things out. It's not looking good for lambyseries, especially as Alutemu is still just playing absolutely on point, but he's got to do it if he wants to stay in GM.
And Dawn will be watching with bated breath as well. Kashinsuke, High 3, everybody who's in the mix for relegation, for promotion, for re-promotion. The implications cannot be overstated of this one game alone. And Alutemu has got the standard cookie-cutter vanilla rogue to deal with it. No Penflinger found in this list, and I think Alutemu has been known to favor still the double Guardian Og Merchant, which I know you're also a fan of, Tarek.
Oh yeah, love my boy, Guardian Orc Merchant. I just feel like every time I see Penflinger, like, I appreciate there are situations where it's very good, where you can get repeated value off of a field contact turn. You can use it to clear off key minions. But I think there are just enough decks against which giving Divine Shield to your field contact, obviously primarily, but a lot of your other minions, just to preserve damage on the board, is just good enough to make it worth it. Personally, although you know, the difference between a Penflinger or a Broomstick instead of Orc Merchant is very, very thin indeed.
Yeah, we'll see a little bit later if the differences in Rogue build come into play, but for now it is just going to be that Rush Warrior once again. Tent Trasher in the opener definitely is a strong card versus Rogue, but without Gunarg, it feels like a bit of an iffy keep, although it's super strong with Coin if you get those two together.
Really, really close again, but lambyseries getting the best of both worlds. This is a premium hand. Imprisoned Gunarg, as I think you were alluding to, it's not only the fact that it gives you a weapon and a 2/2, it's a demon. That's super relevant with Tent Trasher being able to coin out on turn 3 to take out an Octobot, because here for Alutemu, if he just plays it out, this spells doom for that Octobot.
It really does, and Lamby just needs to wait here. Next turn, he can coin out the Tent Trasher. There's some argument to just conditioning, but on only 3 minions, I think it only gets better a little bit later on. And Alutemu, hoping for an Og Merchant, but that's not the case. Could go field contact, one thief. I mean, Foxy, one thief.
We can talk about proccing your own Octobot here, because even though I think Wicked Stab is one of the most crucial cards in the matchup later on, if you're not able to lock down board, having burst damage doesn't matter. And so going for Wicked Stab on your own Octobot here sets up for an insane field contact turn next turn.
Yeah, I like the sound of that. We saw this from Surrender, and to be fair, that was in a situation where he was almost certain that his Octobot was not going to get any frenzy value if he didn't proc it himself. Alutemu doesn't have that strong of a read here, but he's going for it. And I love that he doesn't use Brain Freeze, because that's one of the field contact payoff cards. It's just, and you'd have to combo it out with another field contact proc card. It's very smart. It's a big resource lost, but it does beat lambyseries' game plan of trying to deny the frenzy.
There I was, thinking that Alutemu had fallen into a trap, but secretly he was making the trap himself, and it's lambyseries that's fallen into it. It's just back and forth, Hunter being the hunted, all that nonsense. As Alutemu now, of course, setting up for a premium turn. Lambyseries diverting away from the Tent Trasher, which I can fully understand, because I think he can set up for a cheaper, more effective one later on. But that Samuro is such a big deal to find off of the stage dive. That is the card that counters these types of turns from Alutemu.
That's the Gia special, just ask Sottle when we had some of our practice games. I was always buffing my Samuro off of stage dive, which is such an unlikely one to get off of stage dive in particular. But here we go. Field contact, popping off. The Vanessa can come down as well for a stage dive from Alutemu, which is not really going to draw him anything though, so maybe not the best one to copy off Vanessa.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting one, because obviously you can go Brain Freeze first, just to draw an extra card. But then unless he finds Swindle, I would rather just play Vanessa anyway. I think it's another 2-3. Again, as we were saying, unless they have exactly buffed up Samuro from that stage dive, things look very, very difficult for them to pull it back.
Oh, there's so many ways he can approach this turn. It could potentially even step contact at the end of it, right? If he doesn't like the draws he gets off the top for another turn of go again, then he'll have some more battle cries to go with. But in the end, going for the one thief value, gets another Brain Freeze. Not enough targets to actually use them all on, but a net benefit for Alutemu, at least from what he can see.
Yeah, Brain Freeze is still just a premium card, even if you don't get any especially strong synergy out of it.
No Broom. Stage dive does nothing. What a noob.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I was going to say maybe it can pull out Man Crit Consumed by Hatred. That kind of has Rush, right? We'll go with that. It's obviously lambyseries here. Yeah, exactly. Letting rip with the Samuro.
Known as Charge? I'm sorry, you're saying something very smart. But
No. I mean, yeah, I do not know what that keyword means. I'm pretty sure they deleted it from Hearthstone.
But you're absolutely right. Samuro super clean here. I was potentially considering some type of playmaker turn, but then again, you look at it, next turn conditioning active, it just gets so much better later on. So even though Samuro is a very strong tool, I think it comes down and achieves a huge purpose here, which is kind of distracting Alutemu this turn, while Lamby takes that turn 5 setup for the insurmountable board presence.
This is Rush Warrior at its prime. This is what we've been missing the last few games. He's just been going for playing out minions on curve, hasn't been especially impactful. Now the hand is filling up. It's getting better and better as this conditioning comes online. In terms of the options here, assuming this is 5 cost, which is not necessarily a safe assumption you can make, Rush, I would say, is probably the best one that you can hit. Okay, it is 5 cost. Rush plus deal 3. Yeah, probably the best I think you can piece together.
Yeah, I think Alutemu might be smelling that he has to be in the reactive position from this point onward. The 5 just feels a little bit awkward because it conflicts with his Jandis next turn if he wants to go for that.
Yeah.
But very likely we'll see Jandis and then into the Golem a bit later. So he took Stealth actually in deal 3. So the Stealth means that he's potentially able to stick a minion. Well, almost certainly because he's seen Samuro, right? And that could have implications later on if he's on a burn game plan, but that doesn't seem likely with 1 Wicked Stab used and no discount on Alex.
And now I think for Lamby, as he's taking greedy line after greedy line, Runthak here to fill out his mana. Again, it walks right into this Golem, I will admit, but even factoring that in, I think here the amount of stats that he can get on the board in the next few turns are just illegal.
Just trying to figure out if Alutemu should just dump the stage dive here. I think it's literally just clogging hand space, so I would play it, but maybe it procs a combo card later on. So athletic studies for Rab. These are all kind of bad. Like, he doesn't need the broom at this point, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just whether you would rather have +1 attack on your Rush or give your Playmaker Rush, I guess, right?
There. Oh yeah, I guess the Emerald Sky Talent, that's still a decent card with Playmaker, so yeah, that's definitely better.
And I think, like, correctly realizing that any anti-synergy that comes with N'Zoth and Moonfang is a problem for another day. Like, you are just winning this game way before you need to worry about that.
Yeah, this is just the base Rush Warrior deck that he's using here. Looks like potential coin Tent Trasher here just to get the mana spent, the minion on board. And I think it works out because next turn he's gearing up for a big Playmaker swing and then he'll have turn 8 locked up for Troublemaker. So might as well get the threat on board right now, even if you don't necessarily expect it to stick against the 5/5 stealth.
Is this really better? He could have just gone... Oh, no, sorry, he couldn't have gone Sky Talent, sorry, because it would have eaten up the discount. Yeah, this was the only way to get the Tent Trasher online on this turn.
And I think he would want to just save the Sky Talon with the Playmaker anyway. The reasoning for picking it is because it's cheap and it also gets to multiply with the Playmaker. And Alutemu doesn't really have a way to play around this type of hand, right? He needs to get minion presence to get lambyseries down to a workable health total where Alex Wicked Stab can close things down. And Jandis would be the best way to develop, but that's exactly what Lamby wants to see, is stuff he can rush into.
Yeah, I think you're and my head are in the exact same spot here, in that you are just looking at the aggressive game plan, and Moonfang is about as good of an outcome as you could possibly hope for here. That is premium.
And is it time to unstealth this? I feel like that's Alutemu's best game plan, is to try and race the face now.
I mean, it always gets to go face now that you've seen Samuro. The question is just whether or not you want to save it to potentially step it after you attack. So I am actually a fan of leaving it stealthed here, just because I think there's some potential for extra utility if you find Tenwu.
That is true. I was thinking push the 5 now while you have this Moonfang, which is very likely to eat up some resources. Maybe it sticks, but as we can see, Lamby's hand, it's just so easy to deal with a 5/5.
Yeah, he knows, of course, that the illusion would almost certainly be put on there, but he tests anyway, shakes his head. Damn, why isn't my opponent an idiot? It would be so much easier if they just made the wrong play, but
you know what?
Not,
I think he's free to ignore the Moonfang, potentially. He's just got so many stats.
True.
I was interested in a 4-1 going in Jandis, maybe, and then, like, yeah, you play another one to get the full board.
Yeah, I guess he just has, like, board space is the only issue, right? If he doesn't trade into the Moonfang, then you don't even get to spend all your mana on minions this turn.
I mean, if this board isn't cleared, Alutemu's just lost, so I'm... Okay. Going to trade the low health minions to play around things like Aug Merchant. This still accomplishes pretty much the same thing, right? It's probably just safer overall. And then the Troublemaker is pretty much guaranteed to have space next turn.
So the fact that Alutemu's left this golem stealthed, of course, means that through Tenwu being found off of a secret passage, he could replay it once, maybe even twice if another Shadow Step is found. But the numbers just don't really work out in his favor, even after a value trade. It's just the fact that everything is at 4 instead of 3 that makes this so tough to clear.
Yeah, conditioning and Runthak. It's too much to deal with. Never mind setting up lethal. I'm not sure how he stays alive on board.
That's true.
He's an 8-8. He can stab a 4-4. He can trade down another 4-4, and then he's alive on board, but he has no resources to push his own lethal. Never mind the Troublemaker coming down the next turn.
Yeah, of course, you have to bear in mind that this is the second Wicked stab because he already stabbed his Octobot on turn 3. So his offensive game plan, as you correctly put, just so drastically muted.
Pushing all his resources on the board, hoping that Lamby had a whiff on whatever remaining cards there were, but this is the opposite of that. Doesn't look like the cleanest Troublemaker, to be honest. So what about copying Runthak with Playmaker that's stuck to the board?
That sounds very strong to me.
It means he can't go Sword Eater, but the Sky Talon can also still be copied, and it is immediately buffed twice by the Runthak.
Yeah, it's just so much damage.
3-1 into 5-1, 3-6 into 2-1, or 1-3, wherever you like. As long as the 11 goes face, I'm happy.
Yeah, I agree. This is a situation to go super aggressive. I think there's very, very limited punishes from the Rogue, if any, that could effectively clear this.
Both players know that this game is well and truly over. Lambyseries above starting HP. There is no way for Alutemu to cheese this one out. The 1-1 Thief left in the deck, but even Flame Strike, it's like, it would clear the board, including the trade, but then he doesn't deal with Troublemaker.
Dig in for a miracle. And while one Thief is often the supplier of such demands, I think this might be a little steep even for her.
Flame Strike was what he was looking for, would have allowed him to survive on board from what he could see, but even if it were there, we can see this Troublemaker, we can see the Sword Eater, and Alutemu is going to have to try and get the win on this Rogue in the mirror, it seems like.
Yes, he can survive on board here, actually, I will say, because he's played 5 cards now. He can play it, step it again, end with bump into the 4-4, and then Aug Merchant the 4-4, which means there's only 3 damage on board. I don't think he's winning.
All things considered, yeah.
But he's technically not dead, so we'll go with that.
Why? Oh, Lammy's shaking his head. Okay, did I call this too early? There's Alex's face for Alutemu, potentially. I mean, his own face, potentially. Then he doesn't kill Troublemaker if he does that, so I still don't really see it.
This Troublemaker is like a 2040 as well at this point as well. Like, it's so buff.
Yeah. This 3-5 can go pretty much wherever it likes. Sure, face, Troublemaker, then Sword Eater next turn. As long as the Troublemaker comes down now, right? Because Sword Eater is way worse into Alutemu's own face. So now you've created a huge minion that if Alutemu wants to heal face is going to stick to the board, and if he points the Alex at the minion, then he's dead to the board plus Sword Eater.
That's right. Yep, there's no way out of this one. Alutemu throws it down. A very well fought couple of final turns, and I think a very well played game from Alutemu, recognizing when it was time to go for that self-wicked stab on his Octobot to unlock the rest of his hand. But for lambyseries, it was of course an instance of the warrior deck actually coming together and providing buffs. But it was also a story of exactly stage dive into Samuro. If that had not come down, I think we could have been looking at a very, very different pan out with how this series was going. But the way that this did pan out, Gia, I'm very happy to see, if I'm honest, because we are going all the way to Game 5, all the way to a Rogue Mirror, one of the most common matchups that you're going to see on ladder at the top ranks, and one of the quintessential matchups of this metagame as well.
It feels like all the most high-stakes matches at the end of a long tournament come down to these Rogue Mirrors, right?
True.
The end of Masters Tour Orgrimmar, very iconically already at this point between Gabby and Viper, really showed how back and forth and highly nuanced the matchup can be. Something as small as what card you end on in order to play around Vanessa can be the difference between winning and losing the matchup. Alutemu has obviously shown great proficiency with the deck. I don't necessarily know if we've seen Lamby on the Miracle Rogue too often, because the times he got on stream, it was a lot of LHS, and he was playing the Rush Warrior to 3-0s. We already know he's such a Rush Warrior aficionado, but I'm very excited to see him on one of the toughest decks in the meta now.
Yeah, I think it's a deck that the better players are rising up to getting better win rates, or at the very least the better players with Rogue, even if not overall the stronger players. I think that there's just been a lot of the players who are putting in the work with this deck. I think Shaxi, Chonsu again, who have been doing very, very well with the Miracle Rogue, and I'm glad to see it. It's the kind of deck that does reward you for knowing the deck well, knowing the different matchups well, because it's that kind of high burst deck that I really appreciate. It's not like Demon Hunter where you essentially have unlimited damage. Like, you do have to be careful with your resources, but as long as you have some amount of combo pieces at the end, you can usually deal 30 in one way or another. Whereas Rogue, well, you do technically have 30 burst damage in the deck. You technically have well over with all the replaying of Alexstrasza that you can do. It's about knowing what you can get rid of, what you can keep, and also what you have to discount in order to get there with the Octobots. There's so many different resources that you have to balance, both in terms of mana discount, damage, and tempo, that again, as I said, very, very rewarding of a player who knows it well, and also very rewarding of a player who can draw the absolute stone cold nuts like Alutemu.
Yeah, Octobot and Swindle, very nice to see in the opener. The Aug Merchant can be kept as a guaranteed proc on the Octobot, but I find that even just coining out Octobot in this matchup is such a headache for the other rogue to deal with. Like, oftentimes their best play into that is their own Octobot and says, let the discounts happen for everyone. It's such an interesting mulligan because the only card I'm sure of keeping here is Octobot, honestly. What do you think?
Yeah, like the Octobot, of course, to try and proc an early field contact turn, but without the field contact, you could definitely make the argument that you mulligan the rest to try and find either, as I keep saying, the field contact turn, or Mancrit, Kazakus, even Jandis as he picks up here, is not terrible if you can get it down to 5 mana as well.
Very respectable hand. Even if it's coin Octobot into the Neophyte, that's a pretty decent curve. Or Foxy Vanessa. You generally do want Vanessa to get value because she's always going to give you a card you actually run, almost always, in the deck, so it's good in the matchup, but it's just so much tempo as well to get it down early.
This gets even more complicated because while I was definitely looking at coin Octobot, as I think you and I were both, that was our initial instinct, with Jandis in hand, the ability to go Octobot on 2, coin Jandis on 4, it's a lot closer than it initially appears, and it's a very, very tempting proposition.
It is, but then by that point, it's a lot less likely the Octobot actually goes off. I mean, coin Octobot is traditionally so powerful in the matchup because your opponent will not have the mana to have a big prize plunderer turn to kill it in one fell swoop, and it denies the expected plays of just like Foxy Fraud Swindle or Tempo Neophyte. Maybe not denies to this point from Lamby, but it makes it so much more painful to go for something like that. And now Lamby is faced with the problem of, oh no, do I have to proc this turn, which both denies his field contact, or sorry, called Neophyte turn, and puts him behind on board, right? And you do have to proc it this turn with the dagger if you are going to proc it with dagger, I think, because it would just have one less card. discounted for Alutemu.
I mean, the real decision here for Lamby was, I think, do I play my Neophyte or do I just dagger pass? Because with a couple of nice draws, this is potentially the kind of hand that can kill the Octobot without activating it. If you get Shadow Step, if you get Foxy Fraud, you're very, very close to proccing it with 4 damage off of the Prize Plunderer. But he does make the option to just go for Tempo Neophyte out. And Alutemu now has multiple ways to capitalize on this. I'm not even sure what the best way to go about this hand is.
It feels like maximum tempo is very strong here, but the problem is the 3-1 left on the board that really incentivizes the dagger. Problem is Alutemu doesn't have field contact, and so it feels like these cards are most powerful coming onto the board this turn all at once, while it's tough for Lamby to deal with, and you can go full aggro and try to get a Wicked Stab type of game plan going.
Yeah. Okay. Holding off on the Foxy Vanessa, I can understand, because it's, you know, Neophyte is okay, but it's not one of the best cards that you can get from your opponent. You would, of course, rather find a bit of extra card draw if it's offered to you here, or just card generation in some way or another.
Shadow Step also super premium, as we saw with
yes.
Infinite Step top 5 moment with the field contact for some additional value, of course. For Lamby, the turn looks to be dagger, trade, leave up the 1/4 here, because he could be setting up for what you were talking about of killing the other Octobot without proccing it with the Prize Plunderer. It feels like he's still 1 mana short next turn of being able to do that, though, because traditionally you'd want to go field contact one thief,
right,
and then Prize Plunder something else, or even step the one thief and then Prize Plunderer, but Lamby's just going to choose to proc it now. Minimum cards discounted for Alutemu, which is a big deal. But that means Jandice comes down turn 4 now.
Yeah, big deal. Big deal. Alutemu could, of course, go for the line now of just Foxy Vanessa into Neophyte, as I believe was still the last card played for lambyseries, which is a lot of development, quite a lot of tempo. You're not getting any value, of course, off of the Foxy Fraud discount, but it's still just a 0 mana 3/2.
It's so much pressure, and this is completely leads into Alutemu's game plan, right? That Lamby kind of gave him, which is just early Jandice. Like, from Lamby's perspective, it wasn't wrong what he did, of course, because this could have been like a Guardian Og Merchant in Alutemu's hand that's doing nothing. It just so happens that it's the best tempo card, and it'll be coming down early. So Alutemu is leading into that with maximum pressure and trying to win the matchup in one of the other facets it can go, which is aggro and none of those fancy field contact turns.
Yeah, it turns out that cheating like 5 mana before turn 3 is often a good avenue to victory in Hearthstone. I think for lambyseries we will end up seeing the Orc Merchant and probably one Thief as well. Like, I appreciate that it's good with the field contact turn, but I want to spend my mana now, find some better options, and Brain Freeze is pretty bloomin' good.
Give me that. Not what I want.
A 1 mana Shadow Step. Yeah, Lamby just doesn't want to take damage. This could have huge implications later because of the Jandice coming down. He's actually ahead, quote-unquote, on board. Not after these trades happen, but still maintains some resources for the Brain Freeze. He was just praying that there was no big... There's Earth Element! Not like this! Oh, no.
Yeah, that could be the death knell for lambyseries. It's so tough to deal with. How do you even get through that?
He used the Prize Plunder and he was just hoping. Alutemu went all in with no good follow-up at turn 4, Jandice. He was a nightmare on turn 5. So they nerfed her to 6, but she came down on turn 4.
Oi, oi, oi. I mean, I guess you hope that Alutemu is going for mind games and you bump into the Earth Elemental. That's the best win condition I can come up with.
Okay, I'm going to say a fat no to that because he's not an idiot. I think this is potentially Mancrick Swindle. He's going to take so much damage next turn, but if there's any hope in the world, it's for this Swindle to draw second Prize Plunder, Shadow Step, and then pop off with field contact next turn.
Misses the Mancrick, but hitting Jandice is at least something.
Care to make a wager, friend?
Alutemu can still spend all his mana. He has Passage if anything goes wrong, and now just Mask of Cthulhu to push lethal in 2 turns.
Yeah, I'm snap
Gotta be
picking
the
that mask.
right? Yeah.
No questions. Yeah, do that first and then think. I agree.
Does he even need to kill off the Mankrik? I think this is all going face.
Yeah.
Potentially the one thief and dagger and 1/1 into one thief to prevent some, I don't know, niche outs with Shadow Step. And again, the Gerald Coaster is a 3/1, so you can send it into the Mankrik anyways. But I just don't see how Alutemu's losing if he puts Lamby to a low enough health total where it's not even just Mask, right? He could passage into Wicked Stabs. He could just survive long enough until Alex, which is very likely. Lamby has so few avenues to clear this board, let alone race him for lethal.
Yeah, I think even if lambyseries hits Raz off of the Jandis and kills a whole bunch of these minions, that's still not going to matter because there's too much damage from Alutemu. This could be his final turn he gets to play in Grandmasters. How does he go about it? Field contact, brain freeze first, and then Foxy Fraud? What are the outs off of that? I can't even think of any that would keep him alive for an extra turn. What can come off of Jandis to keep him alive? I can't think of anything off of that either.
Even if he hits double Earth Elise himself, it's just too late. I think the field contact into Foxy needs to Runner Prize Plunderer. And then Shadow Step after Brain Freeze.
Care to make a wager,
Maybe?
friend?
And a passage instead. You got Plunderer, Aug-Merchant, something like that. One Thief stepped. Oh.
Get himself.
He can get Ice Barrier.
Cone of Cold, I think, is the premier way to keep him alive for an
Not
extra
freeze! You can kill it.
That gets through the Earth, Ellie. That's the first step. I mean, he's not then dead on board. He's very, very close, of course. But if he can get himself Brain Freeze as well, okay, he's hanging on in there. Just. That was a far better turn than I was expecting there.
Indeed. Going for passage over the field contact in order to give him outs like Guardian Aug-Merchants, or I guess specifically Snap Freeze. But man, this Mask of Cthulhu or just passage into pretty much anything for Alutemu.
Yeah, obviously Shadow Step, Tenwu, Premium to bounce this Jandis and play it again.
And he is almost just dead. 1 damage off.
One off, yep.
So one thief can get him Runed Orb, or Fireball.
Yeah, I guess
Or
you
he
start
can
with one
Tenwu
thief.
the Jandis.
Yeah, you can still go for that afterwards. But I guess if you don't go for this, then you can't play Wicked Stab Face, which sets up for a more consistent Mask of Cthulhu lethal next turn. So not needing to go for any instant outs, I think Alutemu realizes he can just take it slow and give himself essentially a guaranteed win.
Yep. Tap face, dagger face, set up mask lethal, almost certainly.
Yeah, pointing that face every day of the week. Obviously, the one thing that can get in the way of that would be Cult Neophyte, but if 2 of the 7 mana is spent on Neophyte, there's no way he's going to be able to clear up the rest of the board.
I believe Possessi, loosely translated, said that he would be stabbing the end to Tom potentially in the last series. Alutemu is literally stabbing the end to lambyseries just now.
Oof, brutal. Yeah, 2 for 2 with Possessi and Alutemu, looking like they are going to send players out of Hearthstone Grandmasters, because while lambyseries is thinking of anything he may have forgotten here, any way to stay alive, we can clearly see that with the cards in hand, and I'm sure lambyseries has a pretty good idea, given that he hasn't seen the mage spell yet, of what it might be.
And that's going to be both Chonsu and Dawn saved by Possessi and Alutemu. That's pretty huge news for them. Not that Alutemu and Possessi are playing for them specifically. Alutemu's in this to try and secure his best possible seeding for the playoffs because he's well within range of finishing first or second, and Possessi trying to make sure he's not in 7th or 8th so that he doesn't get that automatic match loss. Just so happens that the hopes of so many other players are riding on their shoulders, and lambyseries, while this will spell the end for him, at least in this season, he almost certainly re-promotes barring some disasters in Masters Tour Valorant.
Yeah, he has a chance, but I'm sure for lambyseries, that one is going to sting. Coming in Grandmasters, immediately relegating out. That's not going to do a lot to your self-esteem, and I'm sure that as a player of a higher caliber, as we believe him to be, as we know him to be, having seen him in action, I do think that if he is able to re-promote through, if nothing goes disastrously wrong, he will be able to turn things around. But the man of the hour at the moment, Alutemu, getting the win here. Final game of the series, all the way down to the wire. Just playing incredibly well throughout, as we know, as we expect from him. I would struggle to name any real strict misplays at all from Alutemu. A couple of differences in playstyle maybe, but he's just an